In this video, we're going to take a look at using some of our Unix tools, including the AWS command line interface, to access the New York City Taxi System database and prepare us for doing some deeper data mining with those data. We're going to demonstrate here how to use the AWS command line interface, at least in a basic functionality, to look into an S3 bucket to see what data are available to you and to download the data of interest. We're going to write a Unix script, a shell script, to download data from the New York City Taxi database, which we'll take a look at that web page here in a little bit. And you can check out the code we used for this demonstration at this GitHub website. So we're going to be working with data from the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission trip record database. This includes all of the kind of formal taxi companies, the yellow and green taxis, as well as for-hire vehicles, which includes things like Uber and Lyft in later years of our record here. And at first glance, the data here look fairly accessible. You can go to this website and click through by year and click on any one of these links by month and by company or category. And you can get a CSV file that you can open in Excel, and you can look at all of the parameters that the TLC manages, including things like the start time and end time for a trip, how much was charged, what taxes were collected, what fees were collected, how far they traveled, all kinds of associated trip metadata that goes with that. And this isn't so bad if you were just interested in, say, yellow taxi trips for January of 2020. But we're interested here in looking at a larger volume of data across a bigger transect of time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to devise a way to get access to all of these data across all months for the years between 2009 and 2020. So in order to do that, we're a little less fortunate in programmatic tools to access each of those CSV files, but fortunately, it doesn't really matter because all of these data are actually hosted on the AWS, Amazon Web Services, through a free to access S3 bucket. So we're able to get those data directly from AWS in bulk instead of downloading one file at a time. That's going to help us out. For demonstration purposes here, this is the code that we're ultimately going to be working with. It ends up being very simple, but I'm going to walk through, for examples, how a couple ways in which we can use the AWS command line interface to explore some of the data that's available to us. But in the end, we're just going to make a new directory and then run this AWS command, and it's going to download everything in the New York City Taxi S3 bucket. Fair warning, that download unpacks to about 300 gigabytes of raw data. So make sure you have some space available to you if you run this command as described. Be a little careful. And then we could do things like drop this into a Hadoop file system if we have one set up, and do more downstream analyses, which we'll talk about in subsequent videos. But for now, let's just look at the terminal. So we're going to make dir NYC Taxi so that we have a place to put this. And then now let's play a little bit with the AWS command line interface. to get us started, let's work through a simple example with the AWS S3 function in the command line interface to just to look into the data available in our Taxi S3 bucket. So we're going to use AWS S3. So AWS says use the command line interface. S3 says which protocol to use. So we're using the data access protocol here. And then ls is the same ls command that we would use on the shell, on the regular command prompt here, but it's going to be executed in the cloud up in AWS land. It's going to ls whatever's in the folder that we're going to define next. So we're going to say ls -- no sign request because this is an S3 bucket that doesn't require a sign in. So it's publicly accessible without an account or anything if you need it. And then we're going to give it a path. So S3://. This is a AWS shorthand for where we're looking. It's S3 in the S3 system, and its name, its folder, if you will, is NYS-TLC. So let's run that. And it takes a short second. And it says, okay, there are two folders, miscellaneous and trip data. All right, so let's look in one of those. I'm going to up arrow that and bring it back to edit. And I'm going to add, after NYC TLC, I'm going to add a slash and go look at the miscellaneous folder. All right, and that time when I remembered to add the slash on the end, it now looked inside of that folder in the NYC TLC S3 bucket, and it's showing me that there's a variety of files here. It looks like there's, there's a few things that are kind of odd in here. We'd have to download these and take a look at these. Medallion trips June 17. There may be a particular reason for that. Shared rides by pickup zone monthly. That may be a summary file. Taxi zone lookup, taxi zones, HTML, and taxi zones zip. Those appear to be metadata related with how they classify where the pickup zones are, which might become relevant to us downstream. And then something about Uber, a particular data set associated with Uber here. So we might want those, but it looks like the data that we actually want here are probably in the file trip or the folder trip data. This is going to be kind of a funny one. So let's figure out how this is going to work, because there's an actual space in that folder name. So it's trip space data, and doing this on the shell might prove problematic because shell thinks that that's a real character there. So we might have to figure out how to quote this. Let's run it and find out. Unknown options data. All right, so it didn't like that. Let's try and escape that. Aha, there we go. All right, so I'm going to show you that one more time. So the only thing I did a backslash instead of a forward slash. Backslashes in Unix language say ignore whatever the next character is that comes after this. So this just says to the terminal that we're working on, pay no attention to this space, keep reading. And in this case, it does. And so it sends that request correctly to the AWS interface. And now it's spit out a very long list of files. So we have green trip data for all of the years, yellow trip data for all of the years, and probably our for hire trip data for all of the years as well. So it goes all the way back to 2009. Yep, yellow trip goes all the way back to 2009, and I assume green trip probably does too. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to formulate a query that's going to collect data from the S3 bucket and copy it into a folder on our local machine. So that way that we will have direct access to the data and we'll be able to do all of the downstream analyses that we want to with it. Right, so for that, we're going to edit this slightly. I'm deciding I want to actually just get all of the entire repository. So I'm going to delete the trip data part of that. And then I'm going to go back here. So just like in Unix, instead of ls, which just lists the files, just like in Unix, the command to copy files from the S3 bucket is cp. So in this case, we're going to copy from an S3 bucket to our local machine. So cp, and because we're trying to copy multiple folders and all of the files within them, we need to add a flag -- recursive. All right. And that's good, but that's going to need a destination. And so we're going to have to say, after S3 NYC TLC, we're going to say space and define where we want this to go. So we're going to put this in a new folder that we just made called NYC Taxi. And we're going to put it there. All right, and we run that, and it's downloading. It'll be at this a little while, so I'm going to cut off the video, and we will follow this up later with some analysis of these data. But that's pretty much it. I'll let you know how it goes.